Hello and good morning, good afternoon on this sunny day. I hope it finds you in good shape, perhaps in reasonably good spirits in the circumstances. My name is Greg Ingham of Media Clash, the publisher of Bristol Life, and welcome to our latest Bristol Life Business Club with more Tales from the Lockdown, where we'll hear candid insights from disparate sectors on how people are navigating these strange times, whether personally, professionally, or managerially. Of course, these are all times when it's been something of a leveller. We can all benefit from the experience, wisdom, insights, knowledge of people from different sectors, and that's the aim of these sessions. And at last, in this great pause, we've seen some signs of businesses coming back, slowly, a bit groggily perhaps, but emerging nonetheless from hibernation. Much of retail started again last week, and we'll be speaking with Sarah Thorp of Room 212, particularly about the retail sector shortly. Do also look out for Bristol Life's Our Doors Are Open social media campaign, where we will promote the businesses which are coming back, the stories that they're experiencing, the custom that they're getting, and what people are saying and doing in retail in Bristol. Please also check our weekly Friday newsletters, which are a great way of promoting your opening up news of all different sorts of sectors beyond retail as well. With any luck, probably by the end of tomorrow, we'll know government guidance on social distancing, which is obviously vital for Bristol, especially for hospitality. And we'll be talking about that sector with the irrepressible duo from Duchess Media shortly. We're also running Bristol Life Business Surgeries. These are practical, in-depth, expert advice. And our next one is on July 1st with Close Brothers on personal financial planning. Various practical considerations from pensions to asset disposal, personal estate planning, opportunities, and so on. Whether professionally or personally, all of us, of course, need to be very, very careful with our finances in current times. If you have a professional service which would help others, it could be digital marketing, recruitment, other legal services, other financial services, office fit out, please do talk to us, because we're aiming to provide a platform which is then free for anyone to experience the wisdom of senior professionals in various areas. And of course, they'll all be available, as will this, on our Bristol Life YouTube channel shortly. One other piece of news, the Bristol Property Awards deadline is now August the 6th. And please, anyone involved in the property sector, any aspect of the value chain, please do consider joining that again. It will be an important celebration when we come forward later in the year of the whole property sector. The next Bristol Life Business Club, by the way, is on July 13th, so it's a little while away, and we will pre-announce who our speakers are. Again, it'll be a very disparate panel. Good luck and good wisdom to all Bristol businesses. On to our speakers today. We have, and we'll be hearing from in this order, Sarah Thorp, Room 212, Meg Pope and Frankie Wallington of Duchess Media, Paul Courtney of Children's Hospice South West, and Amanda Coffey from UE, the Deputy VC and Provost. So let's begin with Sarah. If we could bring you forward, Sarah, that'll be a good thing. So how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yep.
Yeah, if I could ask that question that we always ask, how has lockdown been for you?
It's a bit like when you ask the merry-go-round to stop, so you can have a bit of a break. It did. And then I kind of thought, oh, how do I get back on the merry-go-round again? So it's been interesting. Nice and chill, but also seeing life sort of going all sorts of weird directions and wondering how to get back on the merry-go-round.
Are you thinking differently personally now?
Very much so. Yeah.
Perhaps share how your thinking has changed, whether it's from a purely individual point of view or maybe also about your sector.
Well, right now I'm sitting in Stanton Drew, which is my partner's house, where I used to come and collapse on a Sunday, but now I've been here pretty much full time until very recently, and I've just been homeschooling my daughter about Elizabeth I this morning. So getting an insight into her school and disengaging my brain from the general madness that I used to live all the time on Gloucester Road. Not madness in a good way.
There's a view that in all of us, because of the propulsion of business or domestic life, of deadlines, of kids to school, of meetings or whatever, we're all running so hard that this has given us a chance to pause and reflect. Do you think that you will be changed from this experience?
Definitely. I've had my business for 7 years, and I got very much involved in, for a start, running the business with all the artists. And that start was based on the North Bristol Art Trail. So obviously that's changing. And then sort of seeing how Gloucester Road changed our section of it. So I was very much a driving force of events, which obviously have now changed because you have big gatherings even outside of people. And then I also, 2 years ago, started up my bar, which is very much a community space with lots of gatherings and gallery openings and really full tilt. So I've had to slam the brakes on and think, well, I can't do an awful lot of that still, can't happen. What it's done is it meant that I was gradually, every week I was going back to check on my business, and seeing Gloucester Road a total standstill, and seeing everyone on the streets and how they are reacting, you know, in their long queues in the sunshine for their fruit and veg and their bakery, and doing a really nice cathartic clean of my shop. So I've seen corners of my actual bricks and mortar shop that I haven't seen for 7 years, because it's piled up. You never have that, you know, that chance to really just close the door, say, you know, customers, sorry, you can't come in. I'm just going to have a good old spring clean.
Here's a slightly weird approach, but metaphorically, do you think you've been able to do that yourself as well, to sort of explore parts of your own sort of thinking that you haven't seen in some years, that have been cluttered up by other experiences or whatever?
Absolutely. It's been like an archaeological dig. So I'm down through the layers and actually redressing, going back to how I started and why I started. Paring down the amount of artists I have in the shop, for instance, thinking about who can help me run the shop. At the moment, I've got one other person who's prepared to come out and be in the workplace. Most people still are very, very cautious about being in the shop and, you know, meeting up with lots of other people. People, you know.
Let's talk about that. When did you reopen?
Well, officially, obviously, only last week, but I kept my online business.
Yes.
I always had a room 2 and 2 pickup option for prints and that people wanted to collect. So people often didn't want to pay the postage if they lived just around the corner from my shop on Gloucester Road. So initially if they lived quite near, I'd pop up to the shop once a week because my son was living there as well, and drop off things through their door. But what I was finding, and this is even this sort of deep, not the very deepest lockdown, but, you know, after a few weeks, that as soon as I just opened the door on room 2 and 2, just let the fresh air in, people walking past and really curious, peering in, really wanting to come in, even though it was a total mess and I was knee deep in prints and with a duster in my hand. People really still wanted to. I think people really felt like they missed the chance to be able to have a browse or look at nice things rather than just going to get their basics.
What about Gloucester Road more generally? How has this last week of official opening, and of course there are sort of hybrid offerings where it's online as well as bricks and mortar, but how has this last week been perhaps compared with what any of you might have expected?
It's interesting actually, because I think almost it was busier during the real major bit of lockdown, because so many people, everyone was at home. So if you wanted your basics, you were going to have to go right there to your local shops. So it's almost in a way been slightly quieter. It's much busier out on the road. Obviously, far more cars, way more sirens going up and down. The noise level has gone up, and lots of builders are out there, kind of, so people are still fixing the outside of their properties, scaffolding going up, that kind of thing. And I kind of felt when people earlier were really desperate to come in, when I wasn't allowed to be open, I thought once we open our doors, people would be like really eager to come in. In fact, that hasn't been the case. People are, but people are quite reserved about it. People aren't, that whole dance that everyone did at the very beginning about how far away shall I be from you, and, you know, that really weird sort of thing we weren't used to is sort of going on now more of an actual, if I go physically into this place, who else is in there, what's expected of me, how close can I get to you? Each of the individual shops, the council came round actually last week, a couple of women who have been taken from other roles to visit all the independent shops to see how we were getting on and give us some posters, you know, about social distancing. They were kind of quite laid back in a way, so we've been given guidelines, but there's no absolute, you know, you have to do this, you have to do that. So obviously as independent businesses, everyone's sort of got their own take on it and implementing, putting in different measures. So it's, yeah, as I said, it's a bit of a dance. We're all trying to get used to it.
I've seen a few pieces online, I'm sure you have, of some independent retailers, I'm not talking about Gloucester Road, talking more generally, being at the very least rueful, in some cases quite cross, that consumers are queuing at great length of Primark and the chains and so on that opened last week, and or the coffee shops or whatever else, and have already started turning their back on the indies. Is that something that you recognise? Does that concern you? Or is that just a moment in time where, you know, people are going to explore whatever they can, wherever they can?
Yeah, I think on Gloucester Road, I don't know, I wouldn't feel that everyone on Gloucester Road is suddenly going to rush down to Primark because it's open. I think maybe, we open, during the week, it's been kind of quite an average kind of, you know, a lot of my products, certainly when people have been visiting and they're taking souvenirs of Bristol, so lots of Bristol artwork, that kind of thing, they're taking it back to wherever they come from, or they're about to go on holiday. So obviously that kind of side of it isn't happening. But the regulars very much are still coming into us saying, well, come for my birthday card, or, you know, I can't wait for you to, I'm really glad you're open again. That's a concern. I think on Saturdays, it probably take a long time before we get the usual people who plan their Saturday around a walk up Gloucester Road, because people aren't quite sure yet what's going to be open, what times is everyone going to be open. I think a lot of shops are kind of have got a much more restricted opening time, so they might be opening from 10 till 4. So people aren't quite sure yet, and we're all just testing the water to see what we all want to do. And a lot of people, I suppose, some people are still furloughed, some people are still more part-time. And we're all more cautious about actually being in a shop full-time and seeing a whole load of customers. A friend of mine actually went down into town a couple of days ago and she said the queues for Primark were enormous, but she walked into Marks and Spencer's and it was kind of, you know, she was pretty much the only person there. So
There are many people, of course, including many retailers, who are fundamentally have been pessimistic about high street bricks and mortar retail, already were for structural reasons and all the issues which have been discussed many times, specifically around online. Given this lockdown, are you any more pessimistic or more optimistic now than then about the future of your type of retail and how you see that progressing?
yeah, it's interesting. I think for a start with art, and we've got a few art shops on our section of Gloucester Road. A lot of people have been in lockdown doing lots of painting and decorating, DIY, looking at a bare, freshly painted wall and thinking, oh, I'd love to have a bit of art on my wall. I also get the impression there's still buoyancy in the housing market, so people are doing a bit more maybe moving because they've been in lockdown for ages. Now they're desperate to get away from their smaller place and upsizing, so therefore they'll still need art. People also want to get birthday presents and gifts for each other. But on the other hand, people have been doing massive clear outs and realising they've got all this stuff in their houses. They're waiting for the charity shops to open so they can pass it all on. Which I think tied in anyway on Gloucester Road with the environmental side of it. I mean, I was already aware that people didn't want so much stuff. You know, they're paring down on that. So, and with, if it's said, if there's not tourism, people aren't travelling so much, then people aren't getting those gifts to take, you know, to visit other people. So I think we're still a long way off, really, of knowing how it's going to pan out. But generally, environmentally, you know, we've all got to stop buying less.
There's a very prescient book 3 years back called Stuffocation, which I think is well worth reading in the time that remains of lockdown. For Sarah, for now, thank you. And let's bring in Meg and Frankie from Duchess Media. I'm sure as very, very familiar figures on the circuit, everyone on this call will know of their work. Essentially, it's hospitality-based PR and marketing. I know that there is more than that, but that's the primary focus. Looking at your website, where you talk through in basic terms about your offering of content marketing, social media marketing, advertising, PR, event production, and so on, and eating and drinking your way around the city. Only some of that has been possible in lockdown. How has it been for you each?
It's it took quite a while for us to adjust. It's got to be said. I mean, we did kind of, you know, our whole work was kind of based around bars and restaurants, And, you know, there was this very kind of blurred line of what's work and what's social life. So, you know, we had a great time before all of this, and then all of a sudden everything just stopped. So it went from, you know, not only your life kind of as you know it is so drastically different, but then as a business kind of looking at the bulk of our clients, like you said, who are all hospitality, and just not knowing whether there was going to be anything left at the end of it, really. So yeah, for us, the first few weeks of lockdown and that week before, when all of our bars and restaurants were all closing down, it wasn't very pleasant.
Yeah,
Did
the saddest week of my life.
Did you take that essentially yet more personally, because you're directly involved with your clients, that it felt like, you know, almost part of your business going, because you were not able to be in those bars and so on? How was that?
Yeah, I think initially that first week, I remember we were sat in Bambalan when they said that bars and restaurants were going to close down, and it's just that really weird kind of shell shock. You know, we've spent the last 7 years building up this business and working particularly really closely with the Hide & Co group. So the fact that everything was closing, we were a bit like, well, what do we do? Like, this is our business as well, but we don't necessarily have the financial support that the hospitality industry were going to get. So there was a real mad panic of, are we actually going to be able to come out of this the other side? And luckily, you know, Hide & Co are so they've got so much drive. They started to pivot their business, so we were able to pivot with them. But definitely first couple of weeks, there were a lot of tears.
Talk about Duchess Media as a business. How many people? How did you respond with your team? Who was furloughed and so on? What was that like as a business owner or pair of business owners, sort of navigating that course?
Yeah, really hard. So there were six of us, seven, no, 6 of us, and 3 freelancers, 3 PAYE. So unfortunately 3 freelancers had to go almost immediately because we didn't want them working and us not being able to pay them. That would have been awful. So me and Meg sort of split phone calls and had to quickly say, stop working now, like just put everything down. We'll pay you for everything you've done and we'll have to just sort of see what happens. And then Clem, who's our account director, she was furloughed. She's off furlough now. And Meg and I carried on as normal because actually we then had to take up all the work that needed to carry on.
And you've been making cocktails in lockdown, I gather.
We have. That's our new lockdown skill, and not just for personal consumption. So yeah, we, as Frank said, you know, we work really closely with the Hide & Co group, and a couple of weeks into lockdown, the owners had a chat with us and said, look, we really want to start doing delivery, but all of the team are furloughed. Sort of, how do we do it? We don't, you know, we can't afford to take anyone on off furlough now. So we kind of volunteered and said, well, if you teach us how to make it, then we can go in and we can, you know, we had our own little stations that were socially distanced and we had our specs. So yeah, we spent the first sort of 3 weeks of them setting up that Hide at Home delivery service, actually making the cocktails, packaging everything up, giving it to the delivery drivers, managing sort of like all of those deliveries. And it was so successful that they've since taken one of the general managers off furlough. So she's now kind of overseeing it. We sort of go in every now and again when they have a busy day, but they've now added sort of steak kits and Sunday roast kits from the ops. And yeah, thankfully doing really, really well. So yeah, it's been really interesting to see how they've pivoted like that.
Let's come to the crossover between hospitality businesses and customers, and in the middle is essentially communications, which is your world. How have you approached this time where no one really knows, as of right now, what might be permissible from July 4th onwards?
It's been really difficult. I just before this call had a message from somebody to the Bambalan Facebook page saying, I know that you guys don't know what's going to be happening, but I'd like to book a table. And it's impossible because, you know, we like to be able to offer great customer service and to be able to solve people's problems as quickly as possible. So if somebody does want a booking at the end of July, normally I'd like to be able to say, yeah, absolutely no problem, we'll get it sorted for you. But that you just have to be completely honest. And I think that's, you know, the stance that we're taking is to be completely clear about everything. Until we know anything, we can't give any answers. Sort of from the Hide & Co perspective, they've kind of really sprung into action with kind of looking at what the concerns are from the public. So, you know, there's been loads of surveys done around how many people, like sort of percentages of people that feel comfortable going back to restaurants versus those who don't, the things that they're concerned about. So it's something like 57% of people wouldn't feel comfortable handling physical menus. So we've kind of effectively used those stats to create our marketing campaign to say, right, okay, you guys have spoken and this is how you feel about it. So this is what we're doing as a business to get around that for you. So things like putting in contactless ordering systems, so there's minimal contact between waiters, sort of, you know, obviously social distancing. We don't know whether it's going to be 2 meters or 1 meter, but, you know, the plans for all of that have kind of been roughly laid out. The guys have been working on sort of a really, really in-depth manifesto, which will be shared around the whole team, but also, you know, will be accessible to the public. So it's just completely transparent what's going to happen and what people can expect from coming to the venues.
And is there a sort of plan A, which is if social distancing, which seems unlikely, but remains at 2 meters, or plan B, if it's 1 meter, then it's, you know, broadly good to go?
I think we're actually working to, yeah, I mean, plan A really is that if things stay at 2 meters, that's what we've been working towards. You know, plan B, if they do turn around and say, yes, actually we can reduce social distancing, then I think we will need to kind of have a look at that. And I do think there's going to be a degree of playing it by ear as to what customers, like how people are feeling about it. Because, you know, from our side of things, yes, I'd love to go back to a restaurant, but even, you know, going, as sort of Sarah was saying, kind of going to the shops and sort of that interaction with other people, no matter sort of how you're feeling about the whole lockdown and social distancing, like it's weird. And I think we are going to have to learn quite a bit about how people are feeling and just play it by ear.
But what is your role? If the government will decide what it does, the business owners that you work with will work out, you know, how many tables they can have, how the practicalities will work. But what about your role in terms of reassurance to consumers about the experience? How is your role going to change there?
I mean, I think our kind of main role as things ease up is going to be very clear communication as to kind of when things are happening, how they're happening, how people go about booking. You know, I do think that bookings are going to be a real key thing. I think, you know, walk-ins probably won't be as common as they used to be. We used to rely on, you know, walk-ins to fill the venues, but I think I'm expecting that what will happen is when we get the date, we'll kind of go out, that there will be emails to all of our databases, we'll put everything out on social media. It'll be very much a drive to book your table in advance, so then kind of people can plan their visits. And yeah, again, just kind of being really, really clear and just across all of the marketing channels. So, you know, making sure all of the websites are updated, you know, very, very clear emails and social media posts to everybody, just so that, and I think there's going to be quite a bit more community management for us as well. So, you know, managing social media and dealing with a lot more inquiries and a lot more questions. As I was saying, you know, people getting in contact and saying, can I book a table? We've also had people contact saying, can I have more detail about your social distancing policy? So I think it's just that constant communication. And
one of the other strictures which appears likely to be coming out is the amount of time people can spend in restaurants and bars. That's easier for restaurants. You can book a table at 1, you've got to be off by 2:30 or whatever it is. But that's incredibly complex in bars, trying to manage people's time. But they've got a max of, you know, 2 hours, 1 hour in a pub. Have you had conversations around that?
Yeah, we have had conversations. I mean, nothing's kind of confirmed yet. And again, it's again so up in the air with the government. You know, as soon as we know, then we can start communicating that. But you know, there's talk about people booking space for an afternoon. So, for example, some of the venues that are open during the day that people would go to more for a drink during the afternoon rather than staying in the evening, sort of people committing to a minimum spend. So saying, okay, we'll have that table from this time to that time, we'll commit to a minimum spend, and within that afternoon we can eat and drink as much as we like to that minimum spend. I mean, we don't know whether that's going to happen, but it's certainly one of the things that's been discussed as an option.
Well, Meg and Frankie, and likewise for Sarah and all our panellists, we wish you all the best in navigating that course. It is made slightly more complex in your sector's case by being so based on government guidelines, which we don't know yet, and you're going to have to jump fast come close of play tomorrow, whenever those figures are out. But for now, thank you to both of you. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Let's come on, if we may. Let's come on to Paul at Children's Hospice Southwest. Paul, good afternoon. So how are you today?
Good, thank you. Zooming in from South Devon.
Oh, where in South Devon are you?
Just on the edge of Dartmoor.
Right, and so Children's Hospice Southwest has basically three broad operations, one just outside Bristol, one in Cornwall, and one where you are. So you're the whole of the Southwest, essentially.
Absolutely.
Like everyone, and you're, as Director of Fundraising, you're right in the front line of bringing in the money to enable the activity. Let's talk about that. You clearly have not been able to run the sorts of events which charities habitually have raised their funds from, beyond their core funding. What have you not been able to do, and how much broadly do you think that has impacted the charity?
Well, you're absolutely right, Greg. Everything basically has turned on its head. All of the traditional ways that charities would have sought to raise awareness of the work we do and encourage those to donate and fundraise have been wiped off the table in part. Mass participation events, obviously, like our Rainbow Run series, have just not been able to happen. And the sector as a whole has seen some huge, terrifying levels of loss of income. Early indications suggested the sector would lose about £4.3 billion in the first quarter, and revised forecasts now set that at around 12.4 billion by the end of the financial year.
Paul, could you just put that in, I mean, these are terrifying numbers, but just put that in some sort of context, very roughly what proportion of total funding might that represent?
Well, a lot of charities are looking at revised forecasts, and obviously, like many sectors, it's a changing feat. But many charities that rely on fundraising income are looking at a drop between 42 and 50% of their normal income.
For anybody on this call, just imagine on a continuing basis, at least on a near-term basis, to lose 50% of your income at a time when the need, if anything, in most charities' cases, is rising. So, Paul, if you had a message for those listening to this, if they wished in some form to contribute to the work that your charity is doing, what should they do?
Well, the first thing to say is absolutely, if you'd love to do that, we would love to help you do that. You can donate online on our website. This week, as some people may know, is National Children's Hospices Week, a great week to celebrate all that children's hospices do right across the UK. As I said, we cancelled our real Rainbow Runs, but this weekend just gone, we had nearly 2,000 people running 5K and whatever they wanted to run it, raising sponsorship. And this Friday, coming the 26th, for those that prefer a more sedentary way of fundraising, we're hosting the Great Big Southwest Cream Tea. Easiest fundraiser going. Grab a scone, grab some tea, and have a good debate with your friends as to whether jam or cream goes on first.
I mean, the way you're describing it, and perhaps coming over this morning, this is inventive, and you seem a very optimistic, positive sort of person. But can I come to the personal side? In those early-ish mid-days of lockdown, how was it for you? How did you personally cope or navigate through those weeks?
Well, anybody that is on this call today and has had any contact with a fundraiser or anyone in the charity sector will know that the way we're built is to share stories of hope and to talk about the wonderful things that our charities do. And actually what we spent those first couple of weeks in lockdown doing was exactly the thing that we hate doing, which was asking people to stop doing things, cancelling events, asking our wonderful volunteer fundraising groups to stop going and doing collections at supermarkets and stop doing all the things they want to do. So that was really challenging for us because we do benefit from some wonderful support right across the region and definitely around Bristol as well. There's some fantastic support that we receive. So to be able to have to say to those people, please stop, was really tough. And as you say, at the same time, watching the demand and the need for our services as families facing lockdown with children with terminal illness or with really acute needs, that need was rising.
Well, can I talk about this? This is, of course, amongst the most difficult areas for any charity in current times, which is end-of-life care at a time when relatives can't be there to share that sorrow, that experience for them individually, but with their loved one as well. How has that been for your team, trying to help parents particularly through that extra level of crisis in their lives?
Yeah, it's been, as you say, Greg, it's really, really challenging. And the first thing that we said right from the very beginning was that whilst our hospice sites were going to need to close for regular respite, they would remain open 24/7 for end-of-life care or for symptom control for families that were at that point of crisis. So we have continued to offer that, albeit in a very different way in terms of full PPE and masks and gowns and all of those sorts of things to make sure that staff and families are safe. And we've just had to adapt that model of care, which has also meant going out into the community. So for the last 30 years, our hospices have very much been physical hospice sites. And in the last 3 months, we have completely remodeled our care and have mobilized that right out into the community and taken our nurses and our care staff, our sibling workers, all of those teams that wrap their arms around families out into the community and out into their homes, which has been such an incredible support for those families that are on real lockdown. I think we spent the last couple of months, I'm not sure about you, but we've adjusted to being in lockdown. But for families whose children are acutely poorly, lockdown is serious lockdown. And that continues for months to come.
It's been an intense time. I mean, unimaginably, unbearably intense, I'm sure, for those parents, but also for you as a team, trying to navigate through that. Is it, and this is only a very relative point rather than absolute, is it slightly better now in terms of access that parents might have to their kids?
Well, it's interesting. We were talking with one family a couple of weeks ago, and she said something that struck me quite hard, really. She said, it's lovely to see things beginning to open up again. It's wonderful to see life beginning to return to normal, but it can't yet for us because the risks are still very high and they're still very much there. So there is no return to normality yet for those families. And there won't be for some time, I should think.
Families experiencing that, it will be a very different normality regardless of what's happening on a macro basis. But for now, Paul, thank you. And we'll bring you back for the panel discussion. Thank you. On to another sector entirely. Every single sector has been affected, of course, by this pandemic. So Amanda Coffey, UE Deputy VC and Provost, welcome.
Hello, nice to be here.
Good, and thank you for joining us. You're one of these rare people, I think, who've actually changed your job during lockdown. Is that right? You joined in April?
Absolutely, yes. So what a time to change jobs. So yes, I started at UE on the 1st of April as Deputy Vice Chancellor and Provost. So it's been a very weird experience to be getting to know UE as an institution almost exclusively virtually at the moment. So yes, it's been a bit of a steep learning curve, and most of it from my spare bedroom in my slippers, I have to say.
So that was 8 days, 10 days, whatever, after lockdown, you started this new role. And I'm sure you were pretty familiar with the place, the people, and so on, but entirely distanced for your start. What was your induction like?
So I'd been very fortunate in that I'd had the opportunity to go into UE, into the French A campus for a couple of visits in February. So I'd been able to move my office and to meet with colleagues. And I had all sorts of plans, as you can imagine, moving to a different organisation, lots of plans to go and visit. We're a really large institution, large organisation across a number of campuses. We had to completely rethink my induction. My induction couldn't be wandering around in 3D. So we had to mobilise very quickly for me to be able to meet with colleagues. I've done lots of drop-ins, coffee drop-ins. I've tried to get around the university virtually, but also all those things that one would normally do, attending meetings, taking cues from how people are. I've had to do it all online with a little screen. And so actually, yeah, it's been a steep learning curve, but I've got there, and it's really interesting. 3 months in, I really feel that I've got to know the institution well. although absolutely can't wait to see it in all its 3D glory, and to properly meet colleagues face to face will be lovely when we can do that.
Let's come on to UE and its students. Just map out what the next few months are going to look like and your expectations for the new academic year.
Okay, so you'll know UE, like the rest of the sector, moved very quickly to get learning online and to enable us then to be able to manage our assessments for our students. So I'm delighted to be able to say that, you know, we've been able to assess and progress all of our students, and we're not unfortunately we're not able to, this would have been, you know, moving into graduation time. We won't be hosting physical graduations yet, although we will in the fullness of time. In terms of moving forwards, we're really keen, of course, following on from government advice, of course, but we're very much moving towards getting our campuses reopened. We're really clear that we're not an online university, as with the rest of the sector. We're making our plans to welcome back students to our campuses at the beginning of the academic session. We're working through opening up all our buildings. Obviously, where buildings have been shut for a while, we have to go through various checks to make sure that everything is safe to reopen. We've got students who have got work to finish off. For example, some of our creative arts students have got their portfolio work to finish off. So we're opening up our specialist spaces over the summer for those students to be able to come up and finish. And we're moving towards a campus that will be operational, fully open, fully operational for the start of the new academic year. We will be teaching in different ways. So at the moment, I think even if the government guidance goes down to 1 metre, it's very hard to see how we can deliver big and probably rather conventional lectures where everyone is sitting in rows, sitting very close to each other. So we will be teaching differently. We'll be moving some of our teaching online. So for example, we'll be delivering some of our lectures in an online space, but we're fully intending that students will be able to come in and use our specialist facilities. We'll be doing small group teaching. We're working very closely with the Students' Union to reimagine what Freshers' Week might look like in a socially distanced way. So we're really committed as an institution that we will be open for business, and really looking forward to welcoming our students back. But it's really enabled us to think about how we change the way we do things. So, you know, moving away from exams where people are in very short proximity, moving away from large lectures. Some of those things I think are probably helpful in terms of getting us to rethink about, you know, where do we really value the collaborative and face-to-face teaching that we do. But yeah, a gradual move, but with a view that we'll start to bring our students back over the summer. Fully intending our student residences will be open, and will be open to all our students for the next academic year as expected, albeit with a campus that will look a little bit different and with a teaching offer that will be different.
And how do you expect or anticipate that the social aspect of being a student, and to some extent it comes into social welfare as well, how that will change from the beginning of the next academic year?
It's a really good question, and it's something that we've been giving some attention to, because of course the university experience is a holistic experience of which learning is at the heart, but actually it's around the making friends and making connections, the being part of a students' union, and of course also our students having the opportunity to, you know, be part of a Bristol social scene as well. So things will be different. We're following the government guidance very closely and with interest. We're looking at how we might adapt our campus to providing more outside spaces to be able to manage things in a more socially distanced way. We're working very closely with the Students' Union in terms of thinking about how those societies will continue to operate. Obviously, we'll follow government guidance in terms of things like our sporting activities as well, and what we can do in terms of contact and non-contact sport. So we're fully alert to the fact that the student experience will still need to be a rich and rounded experience. And I think that also means making sure that we also continue to support our students. So all of our student support services that we offer, they've continued to work even during lockdown. And obviously we'll want to make sure that that continues as well.
Tell me about the overall finances of the university. That, you know, perhaps in comparison with some unis, you have, I think it's right, fewer overseas students, but still, you know, a cadre of them for whom this will be more difficult going forwards. how are your finances looking for the next financial year?
Well, I think like the rest of the sector, COVID-19 and the aftermath is going to cost us money. Obviously, you know, along with the rest of the sector, we did things like let our students leave their student accommodation during the third term. So, you know, that's a commercial piece of money for us that we would have lost. We're having to make adaptations to our buildings, which will cost money. And then, yes, the crux of it is that the current financial model across the sector is obviously a model based on student fee income. And there are two aspects to that. You know, obviously, where we have international students, the situation for our international students continues to be uncertain, both in terms of them being able to come to the UK, but also what the appetite will be for the market in terms of that, and that will be different. You're right, our exposure to the international student market is not as great as some other universities, but we've got a robust number of international students. There's also been some concerns across the sector about home students, although all the evidence we have so far is that, you know, across the sector, students want to come back in the autumn. So in terms of our finances, we're modelling what this will look like, and of course not just this year but in future years, because if we lose our international students this year, the knock-on will be for a number of years. We're really fortunate that UE is really well financially managed, where we come from a position of strength. But we will need to be watching our expenditure very carefully, particularly until things become clearer. And I think one of the things that's obviously concerning us alongside the sector is that, you know, we have to get the students in, they have to have a rich experience, we have to be able to manage any future lockdowns effectively. And also, while we continue to have COVID-19, i.e. until there's a vaccine, you know, some of the things around the sector will be a little bit uncertain. But what we're doing therefore is to be really clear about our expenditure, to be really clear about making sure that students come first. So we're making sure that we're continuing to deliver an excellent student experience, and just mindful that we are in a different environment.
As with all sectors, have you had the support that you would wish from government, or is there fundamentally more outstanding that you're lobbying for?
So I think the support from government has been fair. You'll know, well, colleagues may know, Universities UK, the organisation lobbying on behalf of the university sector, has made some very strong calls on government to support the universities, both in terms of learning and teaching, but also in terms of research. We've had some really helpful moves in terms of Tier 4 visas for our international students, around actually trying to make sure that we can manage our research activities well. Could they do more? We recognise that government have a lot of different priorities. But I think what will be really clear is actually, as our students start to come back, actually working with those students and government supporting us in terms of making sure that we continue to deliver an excellent education, I think will be really important. So we're comfortable with what's happened already. I think some of the things that the government have done to try and protect the sector, I think are really interesting in terms of, for example, student number caps. That's been brought in to make sure that actually we try to stabilise the sector. And I think certainly from UWE's perspective, we found that really helpful.
Good. Okay, Amanda, if I could ask you to hold for a second, we'll bring our other panellists back in for a few questions as we finish. So there's Frankie, we're all back on. And Sarah, please join. As Sarah is pressing the requisite buttons, I'll come to, hello, there we are. I'll come to an overall observation, which I'd like you to respond to, that a number of people have observed that in these times we've, this great pause, we've become more perhaps thoughtful, more considerate, more aware of the different roles that people have and so on, more supportive even. Whilst that's been true for these 12, 13, 15 weeks, whatever it's been, do you think that will endure? Do you think that your world and the wider world of Bristol and then beyond will change from this experience? Who'd like to start?
I certainly on Gloucester Road, I'm finding people are very, very smiley. Everyone's got their COVID sort of conversations, you know, what do you do? How are you getting on? All those queues out on the streets, which lucky at the moment, it's good weather. People are keeping a good distance. They're being polite with each other about how near they are when they speak to each other, but they also really want to communicate much more. So I'm having an awful lot of people who don't necessarily want to come to shop in my shop, but they want to sort of see how I am and whether I'm going to continue, and just expressing a concern that we all can keep going.
That's the support for now, which is lovely, and it must be very heartwarming for you to have that level of support. But do you think that type of approach will endure? Will we be fundamentally changing this?
I think so, because I think people will always remember, it's a very major part of our lives, isn't it, the past 3 months. So people really remember the time we've just gone through, and remember who supported them and the shops that were open, and in fact they all shop local. A lot of people will be working from home more probably now. They won't be dashing about and commuting and then sitting in their offices. So they will appreciate the surroundings much more. One thing I'm sad about, and I think everyone I speak to is sad about, is the level of traffic build-up, which doesn't help our communities, because when it becomes really loud, our environment's very loud around us. But I think generally, and I'm even finding that actually out in Stanton Drew, where I've been, a lot of the time as well, people are saying hello to each other much more than they used to, and especially cyclists are waving to each other, and I think hopefully that's going to continue.
Meg and Frankie, do you buy that this will endure, or will we all revert back to our noisy, busy, driven sort of lives we had previously?
I don't know. I think we probably will go back a little bit. It's difficult. Meg and my life was so hectic and so busy before. Every evening there was something happening, and I personally, now we've had a little bit of space in lockdown, don't really want it to go back to that. I've quite enjoyed a bit more sort of mental capacity to unwind and calm down and sort of take stock of things, but then also really want the hospitality industry to get back to where it was. I think in Bristol it's always been such a tight-knit community that actually lockdown has just secured that even more. So I've been doing work with we both have, but maybe me a little bit more, doing work with the Bristol Food Union, and the way they've just rallied around everyone and gone, right, we're a team, come on, let's lock in and do this. That's not going to change. They're going to keep going. But I think Bristol already had that. And this crisis has just gone, oh yeah, actually, we were already pretty awesome. And we're just going to continue to be awesome.
Well, that's a very positive line. Can I just ask you just to amplify a little bit more about Bristol Food Union, for those who aren't aware of it? What's its scale? What does it do? How has it been working in lockdown?
Well, it was a concept that was started by Anya Morris, who used to run Abergavenny Food Festival, and she had already had this idea of creating a Bristol Food Union, which they were about to roll out. And then when the crisis hit, they had to kind of change very quickly. And actually what they did is, with the support of the Bristol hospitality industry, they were raising funds so that they could pay restaurants to provide meals to the NHS and frontline staff, and then the homeless community, and just basically anyone that needed that support. But it also meant that the restaurants could keep a little bit of stuff going, and they weren't just completely off grid. And now that we're sort of moving into the next stage, what they're going to do now is kind of more what they were started for, is a community for the Bristol hospitality industry, where it's more of a kind of support network, and it will be about getting everyone back on their feet and making sure, from the producers to the restaurant owners to the staff that work, that everyone's looked after on that journey.
Okay, thanks. And Paul, do you think the positive changes which people are spotting will endure?
Absolutely. I'm an eternal charity optimist, so I'm definitely going to say yes. I think one of the most refreshing things from the last few weeks has been watching people change their gaze from the big national and international to what matters to them and where they are. And I believe that as people rediscover that, that's going to stick.
How about you, Amanda? This is a close to impossible question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you think that the generation that you and your colleagues are teaching will be fundamentally changed by this experience, in perhaps that the same generation back in 39 to 45 was changed?
I think they will be. Certainly the work that we've been doing with our current students and keeping in touch with them, their own sense of community and their own sense of where they're situated within their local context. I think we're definitely seeing that. I think it will probably also have some impacts about how our students, I mean, not just interact with each other on a kind of physical level, but actually something around how they build their communities when they come to university. So I think we'll see some quite fundamental shifts in terms of how our young people, I guess, interact with each other, but also what they value. And there's something about that bit between the local and the global that I think is going to be really interesting. You know, all of our students, you have to remember, have all been, you know, at home in lockdown with their families, you know, seeing how things have worked in their local communities, great sense of collaboration, of kindness, I guess, as well. And I think some of that we will see coming through, you know, notwithstanding that, you know, that there's been other things going on in the world which are also exercising our students and staff quite rightly. So there's something about whether we can bring some of those elements of the kind of lockdown and the community values that go with the C19 situation, and whether we can then apply that to some of the other grand challenges, I guess, which are sort of global, but also have a local context. So I think it's a really interesting space for some of that work to be happening.
Paul, you're a self-professed optimist. There's a phrase you may like here that I heard last week, that being a pessimist provides an alibi for inertia.
Oh, marvellous.
It's a good one, isn't it? It's the optimists, because they have hope, because they have belief. They're the ones who take action. You're a pessimist, you think it's all terrible. There's not much point. Anyway, I thought I'd give you that because you seem a very positive person indeed. I want to pick up this lockdown point about lockdown making everything local. That we've explored our locale more readily because we've only been able to go in a very small area. We've certainly supported the businesses, those that have been open, and we've missed the businesses because the indies particularly haven't been able to be open in these times. Again, do you think that is going to carry forward? It's almost to your point, Amanda, that an awareness of local is more deeply set now as a result of this. Is that going to endure of itself, that local indie respect for community point? I don't like to take that. Or do you all agree furiously?
Well, I think I could start. I think it's been a bit of a reset, hasn't it? I mean, it's a bit of a reset for all of us. You know, we're all situated in our local communities, although we all operate in different sort of communities of practice. And I think it has been a reset. And I think even those, you know, individuals and families who have really struggled during lockdown, and, you know, lockdown hasn't been a breeze for everyone. You know, the idea that we've all had the opportunities to reflect, it's been really nice to get to know families again. Lockdown's been really challenging for people. But I think it has given them that opportunity to think about that kind of their local community and their community in which they're situated. And I think it's been a real reset. You know, people have discovered, you know, where they live in a different kind of way. They've got to know their neighbours in a different kind of way. And I think, you know, what will be interesting will be to see how far that reset continues. But I think it's we've definitely pushed a reset button. And
I'm guessing you'd all concur with that broadly.
Yeah, I'm actually quite interested in hearing from Amanda, because I've got two sons, and they're 20 and 23. So one's at university and he's stayed in Aberystwyth with his mates. You know, half of them went home back to Bristol and actually were then regretted being back home with their parents. But that's been, and my 20-year-old has basically been in my house in Bristol just drawing every day. And I think for someone of his age to not be, he was working at Wetherspoons in London and then came back the day of lockdown. So I think it's been really good for younger people to actually kind of look in at themselves rather than racing around getting drunk every night, and appreciating, you know, and gradually opening up their circles about who they can meet. And actually a lot of them, the first time they did meet up with their friends was on the Black Lives Matter march.
Well, I want to pick that up in just a second, just to observe this. Of course, this is an element of self-interest. I'll be unabashed in saying it, that with Bristol Life, we absolutely celebrate the locals, celebrate the indies. But it seems to me, speaking with a whole variety of different people, that we're all broadly experiencing the same thing, a heightened awareness of local and the value of the distinctive independent businesses which add to the topography, living culture of a city in a way that perhaps more mass market companies don't and can't. But I want to come on to the one aspect of the Black Lives Matter area, which is specifically and solely this, if I may. There has been a debate started, of course, within seconds of the statue being pulled down, the Colston statue, what would you do with that plinth, with that area? What do you think Bristol should do with it?
I think should be used the same as the vacant plinth at Trafalgar Square. You know, Bristol is one of the most creative cities, I think, in the world. And there's a lot of people who are sitting around with some amazing ideas in their minds. And if there could be some way of system that different people can use that plinth to express themselves creatively, I think, you know, and with social media, I mean, for however people feel about the statue coming down, it's put Bristol on the map, you know, around the world. And if
so some sort of creative rotation or swapping at any rate. Some other thoughts, please.
I actually really like that. I like that idea a lot. But
Yeah,
Frankie put a thing up about putting the statue back up, but being toppled by the protesters, which I thought was quite a nice idea, because it sort of doesn't it's not removing any history, but it's just kind of updating history and showing the city kind of, well, just being Bristol and sort of not being defined by anyone else.
I suppose the act of toppling itself was an historic moment. So
absolutely, and one I think that was so important and so key, and just so that it was such perfect timing. And I was really proud of Bristol when that happened. So it would be nice to commemorate it, but then also still recognise that we had a pretty dodgy past, and that we don't want to completely take that away. You know, that we didn't kind of take ownership of the fact that it was a bit dodgy, and we sort of tried to do something to sort it out.
It may be a repudiation of the past, but it's not a denial of the past or a burying of it. Meg, do you have a thought on the plinth?
To be honest, I think both of those ideas from Sarah and Frankie, I love the idea of sort of Bristol's creativity being celebrated. And as Sarah said, you know, there are so many creative people out there that, whether it's, you know, people actually up there expressing their ideas and their thoughts, or whether it's, you know, different pieces of art that are going up and being rotated, I think, you know, celebrating Bristol's creativity and, yeah, recognising the city for what it is and how brilliant it is.
Great. And Amanda or Paul, thoughts in this area?
I mean, I guess the only thing that I agree with all of those. I think using the space creatively, but history is an odd thing, isn't it? Because actually we still need to recognise history. And I think the point, you know, being made by colleagues about how we continue to recognise what was there. And it's not so much about rewriting history, but it's also kind of recognising that there's lots of uncomfortableness around our history, but that's still needing to be heard and still needing to be told, even if we rewrite it. So it's actually getting that balance right, isn't it?
Yeah. Paul, a final thought.
Well, I think it should be a celebration of community, shouldn't it? It should be a celebration of the vibrancy and the fabulousness of Bristol, the great causes that are at its heart. And perhaps that would also then act as a reminder when we attempted to fall back into those old ways. Maybe it'll drag us back and keep us local.
Well, that seems like a very good point to end on. And on your behalf, I would like to thank our panel today, Sarah, Meg and Frankie, Paul and Amanda. Thanks also to our business club sponsor, Bevan Britton, and for your attention and attendance today. Do look out for that Bristol Life Business Surgery with Close Brothers on July 1st on financial planning. And good luck to all of you navigating these unimagined times. I'm going to paraphrase, and it's not quite fair. I'm going to paraphrase one point we heard earlier. Bristol always has been awesome, and this lockdown has made us realise that more so than ever before. These are tough times, and yes, these too shall pass. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been a very singular Bristol Life Business Club. Thank you. Bristol together. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.